Welcome to Success in Business. This is where entrepreneurs come together to share their nuggets of wisdom. And today we will be hosting Matt Wilson as a guest on our show. Let me tell you a little bit about Matt. So he is a 26+ year veteran, retired Master Sergeant within the Special Operations community. He enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1988 and spent his career with the 75th Ranger Regiment, the 7th Special Forces Group, and also the Delta Force as a heavy breacher and entry specialist. He specializes in clandestine methods of entry and a number of highly specialized skills that we will talk about in the interview today. Before Matt retired in 2015, he started his company, Special Operations Contingent Group, Incorporated, based on his special ops training and experiences. Matt really enjoys giving back by passing on all of the safety and training that he's learned over the past 30 years. He currently lives with his wife in Tennessee and loves to travel. Matt, welcome to the show today. We're so happy to have you.
Well, thank you, Stacey. I appreciate you reaching out to me. And like I said, I'm really excited about today's podcast and everything else. So ask away. I'm just looking forward to whatever we can, banter about, talk about, tell stories, and see where we go from there.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. Well, you had quite the bio, quite the introduction. It's so impressive. I think probably even when you look at it on paper, you probably are like, really? That's me?
I want to meet this guy. Yeah. So.
Oh, so many people would feel the same. So tell us your story. Like, you started the Army in 1988. Kind of tell us why you chose the Army, and then how did you get into this specialized field that you got into?
Well, first of all, good question, because it started when I was about 10 years old, knowing what a Ranger was. So when I was, my dad was in the Army Reserve, and he had a bunch of ammo cans and everything else, down in the basement. I was down there one day. I was 10. And I was like, what are these? And he goes, those are ammo cans. I'm like, okay, great. Started talking to him about it. I was like, what's the best soldier you've ever ran into? He said, that would be a Ranger. I'm like, and it, like the Holy Grail went off in my head. I was like, what is this? So he started telling me about it. I started doing my research, and at a young age that I knew I wanted to go in the Army and be a Ranger. That was it. And so I followed through. Moved around quite a bit, during that time. Left New Jersey, went to New Hampshire, moved when I was 14 from New Hampshire to Ohio, graduated high school at 17, went straight into the military. And so, I went straight to 2nd Ranger Battalion up in Fort Lewis, Washington, and stayed up there for 5 years. Really enjoyed it. Like I said, it started when I had a young age and just followed through with it. So
wow,
it was an excellent start. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I really wouldn't. So
that's awesome. I know a lot of people get started and they don't know exactly what they want, and they're researching as they go, but to know exactly what you want from the beginning, that's very impressive. I love that.
Now, I did take a sidetrack, in high school. I was taking the college prep courses and everything else, and just realized that was not my cup of tea whatsoever. So, and just, so I just, like I said, military was it for me, so. And it was a great start, really was. I mean, it just, to really, I've always been a disciplined, individual, but for that line of work, you really become disciplined, great skill sets and everything else. And just, I really took to it and really enjoyed it. And along the way, I had some excellent leadership, guys that were in charge of me, and the guys I worked with and everything else, and led some really great individuals that, I'll never forget. So it was a really good place for me to be. It really was.
Tell us a little bit about that discipline that you observed around you and that you had to have yourself.
So I always had that discipline when I was young, because my father and my parents both worked and everything else. So they instilled that good work ethic, do what you say, just handshake means everything. So at a young age, I was, shaped by my parents and also my grandfather. He was in World War II, stormed the beach of Omaha and everything else. So, I mean, I heard all the stories when I was younger, and just grew up with that, and just, it was very regimented, I think, because I was the oldest, out of two. And so, I was very disciplined from my parents and what I did. So it just carried over to everything. So when I fell into the, the Ranger lifestyle, I just took to it, loved it, because, you had to be good at a couple things. One, physical fitness, you got to be great at that. So, running, road marching, push-ups, sit-ups, had to, be really good at that, took to it, know your job, just, ambush, recon, raid, and then also, be good at shooting a gun. So, I mean, those are three basic things right there. And I really took to it. I loved it. I mean, it was, and like I said, it was one of those things that just, the discipline came to it. So if I needed to work at something, that's all I focused on. It was like laser like focus, get to Ranger school, don't worry about all the partying, don't worry about all that stuff. Stay focused on getting that goal. And once that goal was met, then you pick up another goal. And so, so I was always chasing the next school or the next, unit assignment and everything else. So that was the way I was focused, the way I was driven. So.
Very good. Very good. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And tell us a little bit about the various groups you were with. So in the bio, I've listed them. So tell us about the regiments and kind of how you transition between them, or any details you would like to share, so we can have a background in what you've done in that area.
Okay. So, so I started off, like I said, in 2nd Ranger Battalion up Fort Lewis, Washington. Did that for 5 years. I was in a jump clearing team. So it was Bravo Company, 2nd Platoon, jump clearing team. So 19 guys jump out of the back of an air, C-130 or out the doors of 141 onto an airfield, clear it and all that. So that was our main job that we had. So basically it was like 6 months of like special operations, back what we call special operations, they're way, way, way past what we did back in the day. So, I mean, they're doing fantastic stuff with everything they're doing now. And then the other 6 months was all patrolling. So, going out to the woods, land navigation, all that stuff. So I did that for 5 years. I think I was getting to the point where I was really getting burned out of, just becoming a lawn dart on an airfield, every month. So I was like, all right. So I went down to Florida, Eglin Air Force Base for, I was a Ranger instructor down there for 2 years, and met some really, really good individuals and everything else, and learned a lot down there too. So, kind of broadened my scope and everything on what else was out there. So I did that for 2 years, and then wanted to go back to, Ranger Regiment. So from there, went through ROPE, Ranger Orientation Program. It was a 3-week program back then. It's now RASP. It's changed, and for the better. What used to be 3 weeks for us, I think, is now like 3 months for the average, Ranger going through. And so once we finished that, I got assigned to 1st Ranger Battalion down in Savannah, Georgia. And so picture, like 1st Ranger Battalion, 2nd and 3rd, they're like all 3 brothers from the same family, but different. So when I got down to 1st Ranger Battalion, it was, one, I was a little bit older. 2, it was, it was a great place to end up at. It really was. I love Savannah. I love the people we were with. I love the mission that we were on. It was a whole new venture going from, Washington State down to Savannah, Georgia. And, like I said, met a lot more, more key leaders, great squad members that I had throughout the years and everything else. So I, still keep in touch with some of them and everything else. Did that for 2.5 years. And then it got to the point where, I wanted to branch out a little bit more. That's when I wanted to go to Special Forces. So I went in 97, went to SFAS, Special Forces Assessment Selection. And that's a 3-week challenge course, basically an assessment course for anyone to go through in the Army, to go through to see if they qualify for the Q course, qualification course. And then after that, become a Green Beret if you make it. So I went through, and I enjoyed it. It was fun but grueling. I remember my 3rd week in it. It was team week. It was the 2nd day of the 3rd week, 2nd event. It was Sand Babies, and that's where you have basically it's, you got to fill up all these sandbags to a certain point, and you got to make sure that the gooseneck is between the hand and the thumb. If it's not, they dump it. You got to carry it back, and it's just, it's, yeah, it's a lot of walking. And you have basically two huge mounts which you got to walk over, go to the other side, walk over that. Well, apparently somewhere in there I broke my foot, and
Oh,
so didn't know it. I just went to the medic later that night after we finished everything. He's like, yeah, you broke the top of your foot there. So one of the metatarsals. I was like, okay, that sucks. He goes, you can do one of two things. You keep driving on, or you just, voluntary withdrawal. I was like, oh, I'm driving on. I'm not coming back and doing this thing again. I'm going to knock it out. We're done. So I pretty much, after that, the medic gave me, Motrin. So I was taking like 2 800 milligram Motrins every like 2 hours. I mean, it's just, I think it petrified my internal organs till this day or something else. But I made it through,
my
so
God.
finished that, made the 24-mile road march, didn't come in last. Okay. So got
Wow.
through all that. Yeah. So it was well worth getting, selected for the Q course. So
Wow. Wow.
got through
Against
all
all
that.
odds. Wow.
Well, I didn't want to quit. That's the whole thing about it. You just don't want to quit. You don't want to be that guy that leaves and everything else. So it's like, I'm getting through this, and that's it. So made it through there, got selected, left First Marine Battalion, went up Fort Bragg, North Carolina, went into this JFK Special Warfare Center, where that's where all the schooling takes place and all that. And so there, it's a year-long program. You go through, you're assigned an MOS, military occupational skill. So I picked 18 Bravo, which is weapons and tactics. It's just something that I really enjoy, something I really like, and everything else. Plus, I just didn't have, I don't think, the brains for being a commo guy or a medic, whatsoever. So, and because that's, the medic is, they're awesome. I mean, they're amazing. And the commo guy can make shots all the way around the world, comms and all that. So hats off to him. Anything with electronics, I just don't do well with, so it's just, I steer clear of it. But I did that, went through the Q course, got assigned to 7th Special Forces Group, ODA 725. That was
Is
a
that
dive
what's on
team.
your shirt?
No, the this is my emblem. So it's a combination between the 75th Ranger Regiment crest and the Special Forces cross arrows, dagger, and everything else. So it's just, like I said, they, both those units made a huge impact on me that, I wanted to, use it in my logo. So it kind of falls within that realm on there. So
Oh, excellent.
yeah. So I really, like I said, really like it. It took me a little bit. One of the guys I work with out of Arizona, he did an amazing job designing the whole logo. Told him what I wanted, came up with several designs. He goes, "Here you go." I was like, "That's perfect." So it took a little bit, but I was, like I said, it was well worth getting that done.
And I see that behind you as well. Tell us about the one behind you.
So a friend of mine, so I've worked with her several times on like videography and everything else. And so she just, trying to post videos for, especially for like my athletes and everything else. She's been a huge help in that. So Miss Reed went ahead and had that design made, put it, had it boxed and everything else, handed to me. So I was like, that's amazing. So I
Wow.
keep it right behind me at all times. So,
Awesome. It looks so nice.
so she was great.
Very good.
So
All right.
yeah.
Yes, you were just catching us up to present, but we want to keep focusing on the army. So like, and then so did you catch us up to the end of your career, or are we still?
Kind of, I'd say it's kind of in the middle where it's at right now. So I spent 8 years with 7th Special Forces Group. Left there, went over to first SFOD Delta or Delta Force as a direct support breacher. So I did that for a year. After I did that, we they came up with an entry specialist cell. So I ended up one of a couple people starting that whole thing, standing up. We were very successful. You know, I was very successful with what we did and all that. And then after I was done that, went over to USAC, United States Army Special Operations Command. And just basically from there, you know, I knew I was getting out. I knew I wanted to, you know, I heard all the horror stories about the, you know, Veterans Administration. So wanted to prepare my, you know, my peace, you know, War and Peace novel of my medical records, get that, you know, ready. I wanted to work on my company. So I took that last couple of years to really focus in on getting ready for the transition into, you know, retirement, transition into the new, you know, my next goal, you know, which is going to be running a company and all that. So that's pretty much my, you know, in a nutshell, my career for
Okay.
the Army and where we're at now. So
Very good. Very good. So
yeah.
I have so many questions about your career.
Please
And
ask.
I know there's a lot of things that you can't talk about, so you'll just say what you can. But I would love to know of an experience that you had where you came up against what seemed like an unsolvable problem, and that you and your team were able to solve it. So it's a challenge that you overcame.
I think that I would say it was when I was with some special force group. We were over in Afghanistan, and I remember we received intel that there was an old objective that the Rangers jumped in and took. It was Objective Rhino, and it was south of Goresh. And so it was one of those airfields that, like I said, you know, so this is probably about 2005, I think it was, when we retook it. So the Rangers jumped in on it several years before us. You know, took it over, everything else, cleaned out all the bad guys. So it was untouched for quite a while. And then we started receiving intel that they were, you know, using that as a jump off point, crossing the border, going in there, training, and then launching the guys. So I think the biggest hurdle that we did, we ended up driving down there, you know, from Kandahar all the way down. And so it was probably about I'd say probably about 250 plus miles that we had to drive. And so we did, you know, over 500 miles with, you know, in just right at 5 days. And so it was nonstop driving. I mean, God bless the team I was with, man, because they were amazing. You know, so, you know, the navigation, you know, if we got stuck, you know, I had my 18 Charlies, you know, they were both heavy wheeled mechanics before they came to SF. So it was, you know, they had that whole, I've got the machines, I've got the vehicles, we can get out of this. They're the ones that kept everything rolling. They're the ones that kept everything going. You know, the land navigation, you know, I was on there. So it was tough getting out there because, like I said, it was very little sleep, a lot of driving. The biggest part, I think it was when we hit the airfield, it was right before the sun was coming up that we had to go and hit this place. And so the guys were exhausted. I mean, just mentally and physically exhausted from everything we're doing. So there we are in our little objective rally point. I'm running around trying to keep everybody awake before we go driving down the airfield to take over this place.
Right.
So luckily, you know, everybody, you know, got a little boost of energy, got ready, drove down there, got our L shape, went in there, and not a shot fired. It was one of those that just, luckily we caught everybody as they were sleeping. We were able to, you know, take that objective down. So they had recoilless rifles all over the place. They had everything else set up, but luckily, no, you know, I guess they figured they were in the middle of nowhere. They didn't have to pull, you know, stand to or security or anything. So we were able to roll in there. But
Wow.
the biggest challenge was the navigation, getting unstuck and
Yes.
staying awake. I think that was the biggest things that we had to do. And so, but it was well worth it, you know, ended up pulling, you know, a dozen plus bad guys off and got them off, you know, out of the field and where they should be. So that was a big challenge. It was, I think, big challenge. It was
Wow.
several, you know, a couple ODAs and you know, going in to do this. So yeah.
That is, wow, that's a really good one. When you think back about what you experienced, what are the hardest things about your job and what were the best things about it?
Hardest things. Let's see. So what you said, the hardest things and best things?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the best thing I could tell you is the camaraderie. By
Uh-huh.
hands down throughout the Army, I think that's the one thing that I miss, but I get a chance to go back and touch is the magic, the camaraderie.
Mhm.
So working with the military, even since I've been out and all that, a lot of special ops and all that. So, Army, Navy, Air Force, all those guys, girls, be able to go back and work with them, touch that magic again and pull back. I think that's to me, the camaraderie is the best. I mean, you can't beat that. You can't duplicate that. Not even, in some of the work areas I've been in and everything else. I don't even think in corporate or anything else, you can develop that. So camaraderie to me is the best. The hardest, starting up, I've been able to start up a couple teams. Like when I was hired I just finished the 18 Fox course when I just got promoted. And that's an intel course, three months and everything else. Finished that, immediately got promoted, brought into ODA Summon 3-5, which was Charlie Company 1st Battalion 7th Group, to stand up the dive team. So, that was difficult because, like I said, I was given 8 months, but I told them I could do it in 6 months. But I had to have the power to hire and fire people as we went around. We shook on it. Me and my company sergeant majors shook on it. I ended up firing 9 guys in that whole 6-month period.
Wow.
To get the team that we wanted, get everybody trained up, and schooled up in combat diver, dive soup, DMT, all the stuff. So there was a lot of that stuff. I think managerial, being a strong leader, I think is another thing too, is sometimes you're not able to hire the guy that you want, you're given the guy, and you have to be able to mentor, you have to mold, you have to lead, you have to train. So there's a lot of things that goes into getting a new guy and being able to, get him quickly up to speed where he needs to be with the rest of the team. So that right there is, I think that's one of the challenges. I'd say one of the number one challenges.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Being a leader and growing the team and being able to bring them up to speed, and yet the challenges that come with that. Yeah, that
yes.
sounds challenging. Yes.
Yeah. So it's rewarding though. So it doesn't go without its rewards, because when you see someone grow and you get them out to schools, you're getting, you're going to on deployments with them, you're starting to see him really, or her, grow into, what they should be and can be. And then once they meet that and they exceed their expectations, I mean, that's really rewarding. It really is. So
Excellent.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd
You
say those are probably the two, best and most challenging.
Okay. You strike me as a very positive person, because first you wanted to address the positive, and then when you said the negative, you brought out the positives in the negative. And actually mindset is something I wanted to ask you about. And that
Okay.
is, you had spoken earlier on a different call that you and I were on about that there's a lot of watching and waiting. And I was wondering, how do you handle that mentally? Because that's actually harder for a lot of people, the watching and waiting aspect of a job instead of the active stuff. So tell us a little bit about how you handled that mentally.
Okay. So you're talking about now with what I do with the contracts and everything else. Okay.
Yeah.
So the watching and waiting is so for example, I've had 2 projects that both of them took roughly about a year, 6 months initially to build the proposal, get everything together, get the right people in place, the right teams and everything else, and then once you have that, and then you give the proposal, once you pull that trigger, that proposal's, out there to that unit, to that group or whoever else, it's there. And then after that, it's like, you're waiting around and you're like, okay, so give it about 3 weeks, reach out to them and everything else. So it's a controlled waiting, I guess you could say. Putting it on your calendar and saying, okay, launch date was this date, follow up is going to be this date, and then go back and follow up, a couple months later. So it's just having, coming up with a little schedule or some type of, timed events that you can place on there that you can follow. If you don't, you're going to drive yourself nuts. Be like, oh, when did I send that? When do I need to follow up? So come up with a plan. Once you launch it, when you're going to go back and follow up and what you're going to do. The other thing too is with the work I do and all the other people that are in this business, it's feast or famine. It really is. And what I mean by that is that, it's not one of these where you go out and all of a sudden, you jump right into, a 5-year contract or, a 10-year contract, whatever else. If you're, very few are that lucky to do that. Because a lot of contracts have to be, put out for bid and all that. And there's several companies that are bidding on it. So you can't say we're going to win that because guess what? You may or may not. So it is, having the tactical patience to see what's in front of you, to plan for it, but also to have what I call a PACE plan, your primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. So if your primary plan is already in motion, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't make it go faster. You can't call that company and say, you got to hire me right now. Let's do this. It's out there. You can't retrieve it. It's done. So during that time, you have alternate methods of looking for other contracts. You're making your cold calls. You're making you're sending your emails. You're building different platforms. And what I mean by platforms, like, looking at what you want to do as a company and how do you want to sell your goods? What skills do you have to sell and everything else? Because when I first got out, I did everything. I was like, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to do, close quarter battle. I'm going to do flat range shooting. I'm going to do, the maritime. I'm going to do all this stuff. And you know what? It confuses people. They look at it. It's like, it's like looking at a menu of 100 items. Which one do you pick? So it's taken me, I'd say probably about a good, probably half the time I've been out. I've been out for about 8 years now. So I'd say right around 4-year point, I talked with a couple of good friends of mine there was 2 or 3 people called me up all within a week, all saying, hey, with your skill set, you should really drill it down to just a few things, because everybody, because everybody's a shooter. Everybody, does all these different skill sets, but there's very few that can do, like clandestine methods of entry, heavy breaching, and some other things. So I've kind of drilled down on that stuff and really, finessed that type of skill set and pushed it out there, because that has a lot of carryovers.
Yeah. Do you mind defining those for us? Tell us a little, define those. The clandestine.
Sure. Okay. So clandestine methods of entry. Is that what you're asking for? Okay. So basically clandestine methods of entry, or CMO, is basically it's being able to get into, whether it's a residence or commercial, like an office or hotel, vehicle or something else, getting in there without any presence being known that you were there, leaving, getting in and out without leaving any kind of trace, whether it's, you're usually gloved up or something else. So you're not leaving, fingerprints or any kind of smudges or anything else. So you're going in, not leaving any prints or not leaving any trace, and getting out of there. And that's either, defeating the locking mechanism by picking it, bypass, or some type of defeat. And then getting in, and there's several things that happens on the inside, whether it's a vehicle, whether it's an apartment, whether it's office or anything else. There's several things that can go on after that. So it just doesn't happen at the door, and just because you made entry doesn't mean I'm done.
Yeah.
That's just the beginning. The beginning actually starts with the whole planning process. And once the planning process starts, then it goes into the infiltration mode where you're moving to the target. And then it's once you're at the target, getting through. Once you're inside, it's then all the tasks that you have to do. So it's a lot that goes into the whole CMO thing. So, you know, you've got exploitation, you have picking other locks. There may be other things that you got to get into there. So that's the whole CMO side on that. So it's more the covert, surreptitious, clandestine side of the house. Then you have the heavy breaching or the exothermic. So basically, it's, you know, there's a couple of them out there. There's Broco, there's Olsen Hunter. There's several different tools of the trade that you can use there. And these are, you know, basically rods that burn up to like 10,000 degrees. So basically it turns, you know, steel metal into like liquid steel. That's what it does. It's so hot and it just melts that. So wow. It's getting in somewhere to get the bad guys out, pretty much is what it is. So let's see what else. So that has a lot of carryover for law enforcement and military. And you know, it's not only, you know, that exothermic can also be used for extrication, you know, of like people, animals, whatever else, from vehicles or from buildings or anything like that. So like I got called in one time. I just got back. I was doing some work over the UAE. I was helping set up some of the training over there for their special activities. So I just got back in town. My wife was just finished running a race, one of the obstacle course races or whatever else. And it was about 2 weeks after the Hard Rock Cafe. It was being built down in the French Quarter and down in Louisiana, and it collapsed. So it went from, I think it was 12, 15 floors high, and it collapsed all the way down to the 8th floor, which was where the parking pad started.
Oh, wow. And
so unfortunately, there was 2 bodies that were still in there. One was pretty much decimated. I mean, he was, because of all the equipment, because all the concrete, all the steel and everything else just basically shredded the poor fellow, you know, all over the place. There was no getting him back. There was a guy who was, unfortunately, his safety harness caught him. So as he was running, it pulled him off his feet. And so his legs were, you know, stuck over the parking garage. You know, I think it was probably about 8 floors, 10 floors up. And so we got called in. It was me and a friend of mine, George Martinez down in Miami, who he works for Smack Tactical. So we do a lot of, you know, same things, but I'll use him. He uses me for a lot of things that's going on. Great guy, smart. So I needed an engineer. I needed a construction guy. You know, I could do everything else, you know, the body retrieval and all that, but I needed him. So they brought us in, and they already had several companies come in. They're like, can't do it. So we went in and gave them our pace plan of how to retrieve the bodies. And unfortunately, you know, they saw another way of going it. So we walked out of that. You know, it was completely up to them. But it is definitely, like I said, it's one of those things that is feast or famine. A lot of the stuff that you should have some carryover into that. So if you're just good at one thing, that's great. I mean, there's probably a very special need for that, but if that one thing is covered by several other companies, you're going to have a lot of waiting around for that. That's why you should diversify with a lot of things that you do and find carryover for what that special skill does. Can it go into all these other methods? You know, so yeah. So yeah.
Wow. Yes. So do any other like stories come to mind, like a challenge, or were there any times where you went in and you were detected or you thought you were and you weren't, or, you know, any kind of story you can think of to tell us?
We'll keep it training. So we'll keep the whole CMO thing training. So, we had one where I was training some students and everything else, unknown location, unknown students, and we were hitting an Airbnb. and we were using that. And those Ring cameras, I'm telling you what, those will give you away every time, unless there's certain ways you can take care of it. And there was a camera probably about 20 feet up that we didn't see because of the lights and all that. We were staying close to the building and all that. One of the students walked away and became a detective, started working on a door. And all of a sudden I hear this voice, step away, stop what you're doing. I'm going to call the cops. It's like, where's that voice coming from? So I kept going on and on. And I was like, okay, guys, get out of here. We'll wait here. So we had our documentation. We had everything all set up and everything. So, I mean, we already had everything worked out. So it was pretty funny just hearing that, because I was like, I've never heard that before. So I was like, okay, that's new, So yeah, we got caught by a Ring camera, so by someone who's in another state talking to us over it. So it was unique, so it's like, okay, so big thing was tell them it's like, hey, look, stick to the plan. We knew we weren't going to go over this area, so stay in this area. There's a reason, for that. So there's, like I said, you go over lessons learned with these people, with the students and everything else. And, I put it this way: if I'm not learning something from them, and they're learning from me, then I need to hang it up. Because, if I go in there with the attitude of like, I know everything and you can't teach me anything, then I'm done. I need to hang it up, because that's right there that's probably the worst attitude you could have going into this job. I always try to learn something new from everybody. Somebody's got something for you to pick up. So
yes. Oh, I love that attitude. That's really good. Yes. Actually, I was thinking of asking you what advice you would give for people coming into either the Army or coming into your current line of work. What advice would you give them to be the best that they could be? And that one right there is gold that you just shared. Do you have any others like that?
Yeah, so I also, so with my company, we also do military preparation, military enlistment preparation. I've helped several young adults, males, get into the military and all that. Unique story. I was working with a good friend of mine, both two dads. Or actually, one was an uncle. His nephew was over in California. One of the other dads I was working with, his son was over here in Franklin. So I was working with both of them, getting them all trained up and everything else for the Rangers. And I couldn't make this up. So when they ended up going through basic, airborne, and they got the RASP, they were sitting next to each other. They started talking. They're like, how'd you get here? How'd you get here? Next thing you know, they dropped my name. And they're like, you got to be kidding me. So it's like, so to the guys I was working with, sat next to each other in RASP, texted their uncle, texted their dad, were like, you got to tell Matt. So it came all the way back through that to the young guys I was working with, actually, met in RASP at the time. Wow. But I digress. But for the whole military prep and all that, I would say, one, find out what you want to do when you're going into the military. Find what interests you, because every branch has almost every job conceivable that you can think of. You want to be a firefighter? Go for it. You want to be a communications guy? Go for it. You want to be cyber? They have that. Go for it. They didn't have cyber, I don't think, when I was in. So they now have a whole cyber unit. They have everything. So I'm like, research what you want to do. And then once you research it, then, go all in, go all in. You have some people that are like, the foot's in the water, but it's also inside the pool. They're like, I don't want to take that full dip. It's like, well, why not? Because commit yourself to that. And once you commit yourself, then, get a regiment, get a schedule, like for example, for me, I wake up at every morning, 05, between 5 and 5:30, I have my coffee. From 5:30 to, 06, I do all my stretching, and then I start my workout, so I do that every morning. And, whether it's cold outside or raining or anything else, it always ends up doing a road march. So, have that discipline, have that discipline early on, because it carries over and it pays big dividends in the end. It really does. And so I would say, find what interests you, research it, go talk to a recruiter, or, like I said, we do military enlistment and prep. So, I mean, I'm getting ready to launch my my website here within the next couple of weeks, and on that website it says military enlistment prep on there. Find a routine that's going to get you through basic, get you through whatever your next AIT, advanced infantry training, is going to be. And then if you're going special ops, then you're going to have to go through airborne. You're going to have to go through some assessment phase and everything else. Be prepared for that. I can help with that, but like I said, it's one of those things that you've got to be driven. No one's going to do it for you. You have to be driven. You have to have goals. Be goal driven. That's it. So
yes. Oh,
yeah.
so good. Such good advice that you've taken and lived throughout your whole career. And then now in your business, like you've taken these principles that you're telling us about and you've lived them, you've embodied them. And I always find that so admirable.
Well, thank you. And like I said, I think it's what saved me. I think we're really developed because when I went to USASOC, the last couple of years, getting ready to get out, it's like, when I was what we call ACAP, it's basically it is a unit on base that basically you go there, they take you through, help you build your resume, help you get ready for job applications, get you ready for finances. And so while I was going through all that, I had a lot of time off where I wasn't going in because I had all these appointments. So I was like, what do? I was like, well, fall back on what I know, and that is stay regimented. Before you go to bed, write down your schedule, what you're going to do. Write out your task, everything else, so that way when you get up in the morning, you go do your PT, you come back, you shower, eat breakfast, sit down in front of the computer. You're not playing computer games. You're not watching YouTube. You're not watching whatever it is you watch. You have a set time from 09 to 12. I'm going to be, building classes. I'm going to be, researching my next job. I'm going to be doing, building my resume. So you got to have some type of discipline. You have to. If you don't, and you come out, a lot of people, I think since I started working from home immediately, it never affected me because, like I said, I had a job, had a schedule and everything else. And even if I wasn't contracting, when I mean I had a job, even when I was contracting, I forced myself to build classes that I could present to other companies. And so that kept me focused, kept me driven on what I needed to do. A lot of these people now, I think from working from home and remote and all that, I think they find themselves with a lot of extra time on their hands. They don't know what to do with it. They go stir crazy. You have to find something that works, and you got to build that schedule. So
yeah,
I guess that's what you could tell the younger kids is, or that if they want to come in, find a skill, commit yourself and do the work, because no one's going to do it for you.
Yes. I just remembered there was a part in your bio that talked about training people for active shooter. And I was wondering if you could explain what that is and kind of what the training looks like.
Sure. So we have, I have two different active shooter programs. One is for parents and the other is for first responders and security officers. So two different ones. One's more for corporate. The other is more for, like I said, parental, guardians, people of that sort. Now, for the one for the parents and the guardians, that is taking you through, the phases. They're, basically, from shots fired to, pre-assault to post-assault, and then, taking you through an active shooter scenario. What's happening with the mind frame of the shooter? What's happening with the mind frame of the students and whoever's in that building? What's happening with the law enforcement? What's happening with the fire department? What's happening with the EMS and everything else? So we break it down step by step, and we put that out there. And then, so I also have another person that works with me, Dr. Melissa Minardo. She's doctor of psychology and everything else. And so I get her big brain to come in. I can do all all the tasks and step by step. And she covers all the critical parts, the mental awareness, the critical awareness, what's happening, pre-assault, even for law enforcement and for family and everything else, because you see, guys all kitted up, geared up, shields, guns, and everything else, getting ready to go in the building. If parents have never seen that before or been, it has a different psychology to it from, if you're the assaulter going in compared to you're the parent watching them going in to get your kids, it helps eases the mind a bit. You actually know kind of in a roundabout way of what's going to happen next, what's going to take place. Now, is it 100% of what we're telling you? No, but it is one of those step-by-step processes, because so many things can fork off and happen in different things. It really can.
Right.
But we try to give you a template of what is taking place from the beginning to the end. And we also talk about post-assault once that happens, when you see a column of assaulters coming out and they have all the kids in between them. They're coming up, and what happens after that? You're probably not going to see your kid for the next hour or more, because they're going to be, you're going to have the EMS there treating them, testing them, checking them, make sure they're not hurt or in shock or anything else. So there's, like I said, so we try to, give the parents feedback and understanding of what's happening. So that's one part of the active shooter. So it's more of the critical awareness of an active shooter scenario.
Yeah.
And the other active shooter scenario is, like I said, is more for the first responders, more for the security forces that you'll find in there. And with that, we of course talk to them about planning. We talk to them about close quarter battle, different types of methods. And then we go into the critical awareness of what they may see and what they may encounter, because you may have some guys that just may have not encountered, a wartime event, or they haven't been on a hit or raid or a takedown or anything else. And so when you have first responders going there that haven't done this before, they're in a completely different frame of mind compared to someone who has experiences going in to do this. So we kind of talk to those guys through the whole steps too, kind of bring awareness what possibly could happen, or possibly what they may go through or experience during that time.
Yeah.
So we try to encompass the whole thing, not only just the physical portion of going in, but also the mental portion of it too. So.
Very good. Okay, so then for going forward, how would our audience be able to connect with you, and tell us a little bit about your athletic team that you sponsor, and anything that you can share with our audience that they would be like, oh, I need that, or he can help me with this, like anything that you could tell us about.
Yes, great question right there. So for Team SOCG, so basically it's this. So I sponsor 4 female athletes, ranges of ages from late 20s to soon to be 60 and everything else. So we have that wide gamut, but they're fantastic. You look at them and each one of them do not look their age. Just they're fantastic. They're tenacious. The amount of physical ability and endurance that these women have are just amazing, and they're great to work with. So to give you a little background on that, so Team SOCG started in I'd say probably the fall of 2017. And so that started with my wife, Carol. And then, I started looking at different athletes who to bring on, everything else. And then I was over the UAE. One of the other athletes posted on Facebook, she's having a heck of a time. She doesn't know what's going on. Her training is stalled, everything else. I reached out to her, was like, I can help you. So basically what I did with the whole Team SOCG is that, I started with the OCR probably, I'd say, let's see, I got out in 2017. So I'd say I was in and out of the OCR realm between 2011, 2012 to about 2017. And so what I liked about it was I've been through some of the best obstacle courses that the military has ever had.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, well, that's helped me train because I had a troop, my troop sergeant major before I went to CTC, which is, it mirrors OTC, which is Delta's, operators training course, which you have basically the direct support goes through, CTC. And so what I had to do for 6 months prior to going to this course was twice a week, I had to go and do, the big obstacle course and the little obstacle course. So I got me real good, at mastering all this stuff.
Wow.
So yeah, I know. Yeah. I couldn't wait till I got into, CTC. So that way I could stop going through the obstacle course all the time. But I carried everything I learned from there and put it into the training for my female athletes. And
And
so basically, what's that?
what sports are they in?
Well, let's see. So all of them started off in OCR, obstacle course racing. So you have, a lot of it was your Spartans, your, Tough Mudders. You had your Greenberry Challenge. So you had all these different, races and challenges that were going on, and they had obstacles all through it. That's why it's obstacle course racing. So what I did was I looked at their training. I was like, okay, so what are you doing? They're like, I'm doing this. I'm like, okay, let's stop. Let's pull you back, and let's train you up for, so basically what I would do is I'd take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and say you were one of my athletes soon to be, or, you're prepping for your next race. With that, I'd have this whole questionnaire and ask you, where are you at? What can you do? What's this? What's your strengths? What's your weaknesses? And with that, I would develop a program based off of the equipment you had, what you had available to you. And
Wow.
then I would develop this, send it to you, and then you train on it. And then basically if it was a new client, I may drop in once a week, say, how's it going? What needs to be tweaked? So that way, first couple of weeks, I'm tweaking as we go along. They may have questions. And then after that, it's just every 3 weeks, doing this. So from 2017 till now, my athletes have been, like I said, just doing phenomenal. So they all start OCR. And then, they started, it wasn't until I'd say last year, middle of last year, beginning last year, somewhere, that a lot of them started branching off. And so I think that might have been because a lot of the races, OCR races, just weren't around, because of, coming off of COVID and everything else. And, so it limited, or it even sunk a lot of the companies because they just couldn't get the people. So they're like, we got to branch off. So my wife got into triathlons, she really duathlons, really like those. Wen River Case, one of my other athletes, she's gotten into the ultra distance running and everything else. Like she'll go out in the mountains, just run for hours, days. I mean, she's just amazing.
Wow.
I've got Jenny Maldonado, who is she was getting into the Deca Fit, really crushing that. That was interesting because I was using basically a workout from kind of like a upper body round robin type deal that we did for Delta's PT test, which is an I think it's eight exercises that you have to do for PT test, where a normal PT test is usually 3.
Mhm.
So I basically looked at DecaFit. I looked at hers. I was like, oh, well, this is easy. This is how we fit this. She was crushing it, loved it. So she's still doing some obstacle course racing. I think she's doing some 10Ks, really getting her kids involved and everything else, which is great. And then I've got Sarah, who is my runner. She does all the, she loves running outside, the trail runs. She's right now she wants to qualify for, I think, the Boston Marathon. So it's, like I said, it's a wide gamut. And the women are amazing. They just like I said, and it's just, it keeps everything I have to keep up with them. I just texted, Jane today. I was like, what week are you on? She's like, I'm on week 8. I'm like, do you need another week? She goes, you got me till week 13. I was like, okay, good. So, I mean, it's a lot to stay up with them, but I enjoy it. I love it. That's one of the things that I really love. And so if anybody was to, go to the site, they'll see that we do, OCR or race prep.
And can you tell us what the link is to that site?
So I wish I could right now. So it's the website's being.
I can put it in the comments if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be fine. I got to get with my web designer, who she's fantastic, but we're developing. I got to see if it's ready to have people go to, because we're still in that process. So okay. Yeah, so I had a website. I took it down during COVID, and all of a sudden I was like, I need one. I need something that's professional. And I reached out to my web designer, and she's just amazing. So we're working on that, I'm going through all the pics, all the videos and everything else. So everything we're talking about, you're going to be able to see on the website and all that.
Awesome. That's great. And in the meantime, what would be a way for them to, in the meantime, what would be a way for them to be able to contact you if they wanted to?
I could give you my email. So email is sockgroup725@gmail.com. So it's SOCGROUP725@gmail.com. So you can reach me on that, and then just ask any question or anything else. And then, like I said, once I get the website up and running, I'll blast that out to everybody. But the OCR prep or the race prep, I'm going to have my athletes on there too, so that way people can direct questions to them.
Oh, very good.
And so that way they can answer, and because I don't want it to just come from me, because they have a world of knowledge also. They really do. And they, like I said, they love getting out there and helping people and everything else. So it's a great community. It really is. And that's another camaraderie that I have with the girls, that just, again, you're active, you're out there, you're helping someone, you're helping improve someone's life and all that. So yeah, it's fun. It is. It's another challenge to sit there and look at someone and not even look at them, and just, talk to them over phone, get all that information, say, all right, and then build a program for them. And then every 3 weeks, 6 weeks, I'm tweaking it. I'm like, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what's your strengths, what are we focusing on? And so it's building that, because a lot of them, like, for example, my wife was probably cruising at about 18 to 22 races a year for a couple of years before, and so, trying to build, it's like, okay, instead of trying to go from race to race to race, which was like almost every weekend, I'm like, all right, pick your biggest races and we'll build your base plan off of that, and then keep going. So it's challenging, and I like that. I mean, I've always liked that, and it's one of those things. It's looking at pieces of a puzzle and fixing, and putting all the pieces together. Like, there it is. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna wrap up with one last question, and it's, if there was a billboard that you could put a quote on it, or just some advice, what advice would you put on it for the world to see?
Can I have a couple answers for that, or is it just got to be one?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so I think for the world to see is one, I immediately went to like security, and for me, our women's safety class, one of the things I always say is be a hard target. And so what I mean by that is the way you carry yourself, the way you present yourself, the way you keep your head out of your phone, the way, you're scanning everything, looking for your entry points, your exit points, looking to identify threat or friendly. Where do you want to sit? To me, that's being a hard target. You're presenting something that, you're staying alert, stay alive. That's one. Let's see. I think that's one of the biggest things I would do, is just, be a hard target, because, the world's a dangerous place, with everything that's going on. And I think that's the biggest thing I see, biggest concern I see, right now within the US is, and all over the world, but I'm just going to focus on the US right now is safety and security. And to
Mhm.
that, I say be a hard target.
I love
So
it. I love it.
that'll be
That
it.
could be on your billboard. It's very concise.
Uh,
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Success in Business. And I learned so much from you and was so enthralled by your story. So thank you so much for joining us.
Stacy, thank you for having me. This has been amazing. So I appreciate it. And I look forward to talking to you again.